Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Global Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely, and normally on Sundays we would have Peter here, but unfortunately he's had to undergo a surgery on his eye, but it's a minor surgery, so there's nothing too serious to worry about, and he will be back very shortly. So I'll have to carry on by myself. So I just want to record really here a short podcast on the current crisis between India and Pakistan. As you know, there was a terrorist incident in Pahalgam, which is a tourist resort in Kashmir the other day. And since then, tension between these two nuclear powers has escalated. So Kashmir is a bone of contention between India and Pakistan and has been really since the partition of 1947-48. What happened was that the Maharaja Singh, the ruler of Kashmir in 1947, he sought independent statehood for Kashmir. However, it was invaded by Muslim forces, and the Maharaja sought protection from India, and he did it by acceding to the state of India. So, in effect, Kashmir became a part of the India that emerged from the partition. Now, a war ensued between the Hindus and the Muslims in Kashmir at this time, and a line of control or a ceasefire line was finally negotiated by the United Nations, and that became a kind of an effective border within Kashmir. So most of it was under the control of India. Some was under the control of Pakistan. Some of it was also under the control of China. But both India and Pakistan claim all of it. But in any case, this tension remained because, according to the United Nations resolution that brought the fighting in 1948 to an end, there was supposed to be a referendum. However, one condition of the referendum was that Pakistan would have to withdraw its forces from Kashmir. Pakistan never did so. And 1965, the war resumed. Pakistan did its usual thing, which was it infiltrated its forces into Kashmir. This infuriated India, and a war between India and Pakistan ensued, which was finally settled under the auspices of the Soviet Union through the Tashkent Agreement. There was the conference between India and Pakistan was in Tashkent. Now it's part of the independent state of Uzbekistan. But nonetheless, both India and Pakistan continue to claim it. Pakistan's claim is demographic. The majority of the population of Kashmir is Muslim, and so Pakistan thinks that Kashmir should belong to Pakistan. India's claim is the lawful one, which was that the Maharaja had acceded to India in 1948, and therefore that's that was the basis of the partition of the Indian subcontinent. Then in 1999, similar war that took place in 1965 again. Guerrilla forces, purportedly Kashmiri freedom fighters, had entered Kashmir, but in reality, it was, of course, Pakistani intelligence services. A brief war ensued, nothing like as ferocious as the 1948 and 65 wars. India again prevailed, and that brought that to an end. So that's three wars that were fought in over Kashmir. And then, of course, there was another war that took place between India and Pakistan in 1971, though that had nothing to do with Kashmir. Though Kashmir took part in some of the fighting, but essentially that was about East Pakistan, which under the British Empire had been known as East Bengal. But the partition, as you know, had separated these two states of Pakistan. They comprised the one state of Pakistan, but it comprised these two entities separated by thousands of miles, also West Pakistan and East Pakistan. East Pakistan was East Bengal, and they essentially were very similar to the West Bengalis, who were part of India. The only difference between the West Bengalis and the East Bengalis was that the West Bengalis were Hindu and the East Bengalis were Muslim. And that was really the basis of the partition. And what then happened was that the government of West Pakistan got very upset with the success in East Pakistan of the Awami League. And the Awami League had objected to the mandatory use of Urdu. So the Bengalis obviously didn't speak Urdu, they spoke Bengali. And this exploded in the emergence of the Awami League. They won an election overwhelmingly in March of 1971, and the government in Lahore, the West Pakistani government, decided to essentially cancel the results of that election and crack down in East Pakistan. This led to a huge humanitarian crisis. The flight of millions and millions of Bengalis into India. India basically had to enter the conflict in part to support the Bengalis. After all, the Bengalis were a part of India, but in part essentially to cut Pakistan down to size. Once they entered this war into East Pakistan and absolutely crushed, annihilated the armies of West Pakistan, then eventually this entity, East Pakistan, would have to go its own way. It had to be separated, and of course that led to the creation of the state of Bangladesh, and Pakistan had been humiliated yet again. So it's been now defeated several times by India, and the war was finally settled, in an agreement, the so-called Simla Treaty, which referred explicitly that, it said that all disputes between India and Pakistan would be resolved peacefully, particularly the dispute in Kashmir. So there'd be no violent resolution of the problem of Kashmir. Now, so we fast forward to today, and we had this terrorist incident in Kashmir. India, with some justification, though we don't yet know whether it is justified, but they suspect that Pakistani intelligence services were behind this terrorist attack in Pahalgam. They've done this before, and so India immediately accused Pakistan of being behind it. Pakistan, of course, denies that its intelligence service were involved in this terrorist incident. It was a particularly nasty terrorist attack because the terrorists were specifically targeting Hindus, and they did so in a particularly brutal way. They were forcing men to undress just in order to see whether they'd been circumcised or not. So in other words, to see if they'd been circumcised, and obviously they were Muslims, and therefore their lives would be spared. If they weren't circumcised, then they were Hindus, and therefore they'd be killed. It was really the worst kind of ethnic targeting, quite horrific. So naturally, there's absolute fury in India over this. And Modi, the Hindu nationalist prime minister of India, is now vowing revenge. India has already cancelled a water sharing agreement dating all the way back to 1960, and Pakistan in turn said that it's putting the 1972 similar treaty in abeyance. The similar treaty was the treaty that ended the 1971 war. There's been expulsions of diplomats. India has closed the border with Pakistan, and there have been some shooting across the border between India and Pakistan. So it's quite tense. And as we look at the history, there have been a number of wars between these two powers. So it wouldn't be that astonishing if this crisis led to another war. However, I mean, there are really two important differences between this crisis and the previous crises. In the first place, every other war between India and Pakistan, save for that quite relatively minor conflict in 1999, every war had taken place before either India or Pakistan became nuclear powers. And now nuclear weapons do bring caution to statesmanship. The 48, 65, 71 wars had led to very serious casualties on both sides. If either power had had nuclear weapons then, it's almost certain that it could have led to a nuclear war. But once you have nuclear weapons, it also means that nobody really wants to go to war because obviously it brings caution to everything that you do. You really don't want to provoke a very dangerous conflict in which the other side will feel that it has no other resort but to reach for its nuclear arsenal. And so I think the possession of nuclear weapons by both India and Pakistan has brought a measure of stability to their relationship. Neither wants to take risks. And I think that's really a very strong argument against this non-proliferation obsession that has been going on for decades and decades. So somehow we have to limit the number of countries that have nuclear weapons. And obviously, nuclear weapons, it's undesirable in general for too many countries to possess nuclear weapons. However, there doesn't seem to be any real evidence that nuclear weapons cause any instability or lead to wars and lead to the use of nuclear weapons. On the contrary, all the evidence suggests that nuclear weapons bring stability and induce caution among powers. Nobody messes with North Korea because North Korea has nuclear weapons. If, however, you're Iraq or Libya or Yugoslavia, then you get thumped because whoever's doing the thumping knows that you have no means of retaliating with nuclear weapons. And let's keep in mind that even China, in the throes of the loony Cultural Revolution, even then, China didn't even come close to using nuclear weapons, to threatening to use nuclear weapons. So, despite the apparent insanity at the top of the Chinese leadership, nobody thought of doing anything really insane like resorting to nuclear weapons. So nuclear weapons do bring, I think, stability. And I think the very fact that since 1974, 75, when both India and Pakistan acquired nuclear weapons, there really hasn't been the serious wars that had plagued these two countries in the previous years. So it's been 50 years, and other than that, a relatively minor conflict in 1999, which was settled quite quickly. the India and Pakistan haven't gone to war. So that's what makes me optimistic that despite the bravado and these vehement talk from both sides, New Delhi and Lahore, they're not going to go to war against one another. And like there may be some shooting skirmishes across the border, but it's unlikely to get any more dangerous. So I think that's the good part of it. The bad part, and again, this is something different from the previous India and Pakistan crisis, is the very large Indian Pakistani diaspora that now lives in other parts of the world, in particularly in Europe, and in particular in the United Kingdom. And we have seen in the past riots involving Muslim immigrants of Indian and Pakistani origin going, toe to toe with extreme violence against one another in the streets of the United Kingdom over issues that have nothing to do with anything going on in the United Kingdom. Instead, the issues all pertain to the conflicts between India and Pakistan, and particularly Kashmir. So now that there is this conflict over Kashmir, there's a very real prospect that there will be violence in where? In the United Kingdom, in the street, particularly the northern cities of England, and in which they're going to fight it out over Kashmir. And this is the result of, I think, a reckless policy on the part of the British in bringing in millions upon millions of immigrants from the Indian subcontinent, who naturally bring their conflicts with them. And then suddenly the cities of London, cities rather of England, become sites of violence between rival gangs over issues that have absolutely nothing to do with Great Britain. And I think this is quite likely, and it's quite a dangerous development. I mean, we've seen that particularly on other issues, such as the Israel and Palestine conflict, where because Europe now is a base for a very large, very substantial Muslim population, that the issue of Palestine gets fought out in the streets of Europe. So we have the Palestinian conflict, which is fought out in Europe, but now we have India and Pakistan, and the Kashmiri conflict fought out in the cities of England. And this happened in 2022 in the city of Leicester, where there were very violent exchanges between migrants of Indian and Pakistani origin, and it had to do with Kashmir. So if this crisis doesn't end in the next few days, I think something like this is likely to happen, and probably even more violent than the fights that we saw in 2022. So that's different from previous wars, where while there was obviously quite a number of migrants of Indian and Pakistani origin, but these immigration hadn't yet reached a critical mass. It has reached a critical mass now, and so the Kashmir conflict could well be fought out in the streets of England. Anyway, that was a few reflections on what's going on over Kashmir. And remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye-bye.